2 Tage vor Beginn der Weltklimakonferenz in der Bundesstadt.
The polar ice caps are melting.
À la veille de l'ouverture de la COP23,
Peta sepekat berwarna kekuning-kuningan menyelimuti kota Palangkaraya sejak pagi tadi.
The United States, as expected, will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
One country with a huge stake in the climate change story is Indonesia. At the rate that temperatures and sea levels are rising, 2,000 of the country's islands, 42 million households, are at risk of being swamped by the year 2050. But when you examine mainstream media coverage of environmental issues, beyond the occasional disaster story on a forest fire or a mudslide, there's not much on the bigger contextual picture. Media groups are a bit too close, too reliant on agribusiness and mining companies who are among the worst environmental offenders. Mainstream journalists also find it hard to report on these issues because of political corruption. So NGOs have stepped in to fill the information gap. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on how the Indonesian media tend to toe the corporate and government line.
In 2015, huge fires swept through Indonesia's rainforests.
Pemirsa, kemarau panjang menyebabkan kebakaran ratusan hektar lahan di sejumlah daerah.
kebakaran lahan dan hutan di Pulau Kalimantan semakin meluas ke wilayah timur.
2.6 million hectares of forest, an area roughly the size of Rwanda, was set aflame to clear space for palm oil plantations. The fires produced in just 3 weeks more greenhouse gases than Germany does in an entire year.
Kabut sepekat berwarna kekuning-kuningan menyelimuti kota Palangkaraya sejak pagi tadi.
The fires led Indonesian news bulletins as long as they were burning, but the minute they died down, so did the coverage. Forest fires have become an annual occurrence in Indonesia, and still the country's media seldom devote the column inches and airtime needed to explore the causes behind them.
Lebih mudah meliput olahraga.
It is easier for journalists to cover sports or the economy because they have scores and numbers. Those stories are much easier to write than environmental stories, where journalists have to understand biology, ecology, waste and chemistry.
Limbah, berbagai jenis bahan kimia.
Pemahaman jurnalis atau
The media's comprehension of environmental issues is not good enough, so they focus on the most obvious things like forest fires or damage caused by mining. The media don't go near subjects like water poisoned due to toxic waste or air pollution because they don't know enough about those subjects.
belum muncul.
Crucial to how Indonesia's news outlets cover the environment and the destruction of it is the shape of the media landscape. When the 3 decades of President Muhammad Suharto's dictatorship ended in 1998, the Indonesian media market went through a growth spurt. Nearly 20 years on, 1,500 TV channels and 500 radio stations compete for ratings and advertising revenue. Most of these outlets are owned by conglomerates, many of which have big stakes in agribusiness and mining companies. The country's first and second largest media groups, MNC and Java, as well as smaller groups like Visi and City Corp, all have significant interests in natural resources.
Media owners are often connected to owners of extractive industry companies like mining or palm oil, which are among the greatest contributors to deforestation, environmental damage and air pollution. A lot of media owners are stakeholders in these industries. For instance, they're the bosses of TV stations and coal mining companies at the same time.
Berita lingkungan itu tidak menjual.
Environmental news doesn't sell, so journalists second-guess themselves as to whether they should pursue such stories or not. For example, I was part of a program to help newspapers set up environmental editorial desks. The Tribune Pekanbaru newspaper agreed to set up a section called Green City. However, it didn't bring in advertising or turn a profit, so they shut it down.
Ditutup rubrik itu. TV1 ingin berbasiskan kasus.
TV1 focuses on news events because we can see that this is what the viewers want and we take that into consideration. Breaking news, special news have higher ratings.
Seorang ibu warga kecamatan Cikupa, Tangerang, Banten ini histeris saat barang berharga miliknya hanyut terbawa banjir Selasa petang.
We feel that it's difficult to report on subjects that are not visible, where the picture is not clear.
However, even when the picture is crystal clear, the journalism can still fall short. Case in point, 2006, and a mud volcano in Sidoarjo district of East Java that exploded and submerged 15 villages, displacing almost 40,000 people. The evidence overwhelmingly pointed at drilling taking place nearby and the mining by the oil and gas company Lapindo Brantas as the most likely cause. The company said a nearby earthquake had triggered the mud volcano, and that in any case, it had followed industry safety regulations at its drill site. The owner, Abu Rizal Bakri, was a government minister at the time. He also owns 3 media outlets, the Surabaya Post, Viva News, and TV1. For those following the media coverage of the disaster, the reporting on these outlets was clearly compromised.
Lumpur Sidoarjo ternyata membawa berkah tersendiri bagi korban terdampak lumpur.
Setiap pendekatan framing media terhadap persoalan ini.
The way the media frames environmental issues is not neutral. It depends on the political affiliations of the owners. There were 2 different narratives on the Lapindo news story. The media owned by the Bakri family, TV1, called it the Sidoarjo mudflow to imply that it was a natural disaster. All the other media, for example Metro TV, called it the Lapindo mudflow, using the name of the company responsible.
Kerusakannya akibat itu.
Warga korban lumpur Lapindo memperingati salah satunya adalah dengan mengarak ogoh-ogoh Abu Rizal Bakri dan melemparkannya ke kolam penampungan lumpur.
Ada sejumlah kasus di luar negeri berkaitan dengan bencana yang
There are a number of disasters abroad, like Chernobyl, where the name of the town is used as reference. And if I'm not mistaken, Sidoarjo mud disaster was the phrase used by the government and parliament to refer to the incident. So it seems the most appropriate terminology to us. But we do not get orders from our owner saying this news should be like this or this news should be like that.
In relation to the Lapindo story, TV1 reports amply on how much Lapindo has paid out in compensation.
Keluarga Nirwan juga terima kasih banyak terhadap keluarga Nirwan, keluarga Bakri, bahwa beliau ya yang di sana itu mau harusnya memahami kondisi di sini.
But the channel won't do stories about how many dozens of houses face imminent flooding because of an overflowing dam.
Yang udah hampir penuh ini gitu kan.
The complex web of corporate ownership and vested political interests in the media makes it difficult to report, let alone investigate, the impact poor industrial standards and monitoring has on the environment. Add to that a dearth of reliable sources, minimal data, and widespread corruption, it's near impossible to trace responsibility for environmental damage. NGOs have stepped into the vacuum and are helping reporters connect the dots. In May this year, the mining advocacy network, JATAM, teamed up with Tempo, a weekly investigative publication, to produce The Killing Pits, a deeply reported story of corporate greed and irresponsibility in the mining industry.
Investigasi kita membuktikan bahwa banyak lubang menganga.
Our investigation found that those pits have claimed lives, that children fell into the holes. They are poisonous due to chemical waste. We reported this to the government. The government applied sanctions to the company at the time, and so the company sent thugs to attack our headquarters. We face a lot of intimidation, threats, and violence. The culture of violence has never gone away, and the authorities are also complicit.
Termasuk pemerintah sendiri kan.
In September 2015, Indonesia's President Joko Widodo announced that the country would cut the growth of greenhouse gas emissions by 29% by 2030. The announcement was covered across Indonesia's news outlets. But since then, there's been little follow-up on what progress there has been, or whether there is a plan at all to achieve this target. What little media debate and coverage there is of efforts to protect Indonesia's rainforests are often framed in terms of a stark choice between the economy and the environment.
Komoditas kelapa sawit menjadi penting bagi perekonomian. Karena itu, pemerintah fokus mendorong kemajuan industri kelapa sawit nasional.
Padahal kita kan negara berkembang gitu.
Some media argue that Indonesia is a developing country and that it still needs more land for palm oil plantations. In 2016, when the president wanted to extend the moratorium on palm oil plantations to protect the peatlands, some outlets planted the idea that business would grind to a halt.
Pasti ini bisnisnya stop.
Saya sendiri mengalami
I have learned that only when the media care and do good reporting on the environment can there be any influence on policy to protect it. So unless there are more journalists writing about green issues, climate change will not be stopped.